Hey, good
There we
morning,
are.
everybody, and welcome to Talking Niagara this morning with Dave Wheeler and myself, Peter Giblett. And today we got an interesting mix, I guess. I think we're trying to do less US ones this week, maybe, I hope. Maybe.
Maybe, but it's a little bit impossible almost because I
Yeah,
think the
I
markets
know.
are the market the trade stock market's going to go for a shimmy shank uh, because Trump's announced worldwide steel tariffs of 25%. That's on everybody. That's on all of the US's uh, allies. It's Japan, Korea, Australia, Canada,
Yeah,
and aluminum too. 10%, I think, on aluminum.
yeah. All right, before we get to that lot, Buffy Sainte-Marie's Order of Canada has been terminated. She's in her 80s, I believe. She's now in her 80s, and so they terminated this Order of Canada.
Well, the thing about this, I think,
It's
yeah,
correct. It's
it
correct.
yeah, it's the thing to do. She is the what they call the pretendian.
Yeah,
Certain people like Elizabeth Warren have taken advantage of pretending that they were indigenous people to advance their careers. With Elizabeth Warren, it was she tried to pretend she was an indigenous background. She had an indigenous background that took advantage of that, and even I think that she registered as as a minority for the bar in Texas. She got special privileges for being a minority when she went to the university, I think of University of Pennsylvania, and of course that's all being exposed. And when that became exposed, it ruined her career.
yeah.
Basically, well, she's still very popular uh, because she's a pretty good politician, but it kind of ruined her chances to advance any further, and nobody really pays much attention to her because they always throw that in her face again. The and of
Well,
course
I
Trump
think
called her Pocahontas and so on.
yeah, and the thing is that Buffy Sainte-Marie, as a singer, she's still a singer, right? She's still got a fan base. Well, uh, people who liked her for her singing should still like her for her singing, right? Should still like her songs.
Yeah, her songs are great. Particularly one that stands out to me is "Universal Soldier." It's a great song, and but somewhere in her mind, she had convinced herself that she was North American Indian, and later on, she said she's never lied about it at all, and uh, so she's never, and she won't speak on it. And the Canadian government took quite a while because this came out what a couple years ago now,
Yeah,
and
I think this has been out 23. Yes, sometime in 23 it was. Yeah.
rumors have been floating around for that for a very long
Uh,
time.
yeah, rumors have probably been floating around since about 2018, I think,
Yeah,
if
so
I remember rightly.
she's been adopted into the culture of the Cree of Cree Nation of Saskatchewan, which is okay, and they still like her, as far as I know. But the fact of the matter is, she did lie, and she did. And if she says she didn't lie, she definitely made it very clear to everyone that she was a North American Indian. She was adopted by her family. Her family's always said that's I don't know what she's talking about, kind of thing. And
Mm.
I'll go back to Elizabeth Warren to another so-called pretendian. She also the Cherokees and other native groups contested her lineage, uh, and said that no, she wasn't a part of. the Cherokee Nation. In this case, I don't know what the Cree are saying, whatever spokespersons they may have had.
There's
But
nothing in this article about that, about the Cree.
yeah. Now, this is late in her life, and this is not the first time it's happened in Canada too. The fellow by the name of Grey Owl, who brought a lot of attention to Indigenous ways of life and the Indigenous experience in Canada, turned out to be an Englishman. He called himself Grey Owl, and everybody thought he was an Indigenous guy and all that. But when they dug a little deeper, after he became famous, went around and did lecture series and so on, and whatever he did, and everybody was really, saying how wonderful he was. Turns out that he wasn't what he said he was. I don't get this. Like, there is this. I don't know why you'd want to be somebody you weren't, and I don't know if Buffy did it on purpose to get more attention.
I rather suspect that probably what it was is she's one of these people who probably thought, well, given that she's related, she's claiming relative to be related to Cree. I think she probably felt that the Cree were in such a bad state that they needed to be. Their plight needed to be highlighted, and somehow in doing that she kind of got somewhere made a misstep along the way, and then having made the misstep she couldn't then get out of it.
Yeah, apparently she's Sicilian, of Sicilian background, or partly Sicilian, and that's the best I heard what her actual roots were. And if you go far enough back, she originally connected herself with, I think it was Massachusetts nations of Indigenous people, and then later switched it to Cree of Saskatchewan. So she wasn't even consistent on where her ethnic background was from. Her supposed background was from. Yeah. It's
it would have been much
better. She was a very talented folk singer. She was all the rage in Greenwich Village for a very long time. She was one of the most sought after artists, and it
would have been much better
music. What?
Yeah, it would have been much better for her to have made her songs and played how bad the native population was being treated, and given a portion of her income to the Cree or whatever native group that she fancied, than to invent this whole fiction.
Yeah, the really interesting thing is she's never really come out and spoke clearly about this, either in defense or whatever. She's just kind of not wanted to talk about it, basically. I don't really think that's fair to the native groups in Canada. I think she should come clean, basically, and then, as you say, switch her focus and saying, well, I may not have been a Cree, but I've identified with their culture. I've been adopted by them, and I still want to make the plight of the Indigenous people very evident. What she's done now has actually harmed it a bit, because it's made the Cree and other Indigenous people who've accepted her look like dupes.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Yeah, it really has done it's done a bad thing, and it would have been much better to have kind of said, that I think to have highlighted the plight of the Cree under Canadian rule, than to have tried to be one.
Is she even a Canadian now? Well, they.
But it's easy for us as outsiders to say that, right?
Yeah, it's a very unusual story, of course, and like I said, it's not singular because, like I
Yeah.
said, Gray Owl did it. Elizabeth Warren took advantage of it, but I think a person like Elizabeth Warren actually convinced herself that it was true. There was no evidence that it was true. There was uh, some family legacy idea that legend that they had some native blood in them somewhere along the line, and based on that wholly, she went off to tell everybody that she was partly indigenous. And of course, like I said, like that got her minority advantages in the University of Pennsylvania. As a matter of fact, I think it was the Pennsylvania University of Pennsylvania that was able to tout her as a minority figure in their
Mm.
school, a prominent person of minority background, so they could get points. See, we're doing things for minorities.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And that's actually, and the school and people like that are doing things out of the best knowledge that they have. And it turns out that they were lying as well.
yeah, well, they didn't bother checking,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of resistance too. There was people saying, "Hey, wait a minute, University of Pennsylvania, there is no real evidence that she's an indigenous person. You're just taking her word for it."
Yeah.
And
Well, there were, to my knowledge, indigenous people did bring up did bring up white children. Um, there are many stories about indigenous folk about white people having married into indigenous families, etc., or even adopting children who had been found in the Wild West.
oh, it was very common here in the Eastern Woodlands for Native Americans to, well, when they went on raids or whatever, they would take the children and raise them. And there was a time in American history, it was pointed out by Franklin and I think Jefferson too, that they were losing a, a significant amount of young men who went over and and became went to live with indigenous people and adopted their way of life. I read a thing about it. It was kind of amazing. Like there was a bit of alarm there that there was a significant number of men just kind of leaving the Western civilization and joining up with the indigenous
Well,
people.
the question about what happened to the Roanoke colony, of course.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. That's
No,
that.
I know. Yeah, but much earlier. But again,
Well, the people of the Roanoke settlement may have been absorbed by
yeah,
the,
may have been absorbed. Yeah,
but yeah, that's gone on and off. As a matter of fact, one of my neighbors, his lineage goes back to where he was. One of his ancestors had been captured by Native Americans and sold back to the British here in Newark in 1777, just as the revolution was getting underway, the American Revolution was getting away. They had what they would do is they would take the children, I say, or in raids or whatever else, and then uh, they didn't kill them. A lot of times, they would trade them if they didn't adopt them into their tribes. There's a story about an American soldier in the War of 1812 uh, when the native armies basically captured a young man and took him with them and adopted him. But he stayed with them for 5 years and then said, I want to go see my family again. And they were a little bit disappointed he wanted to leave, but he had been treated very, very well
yeah,
by
yeah. All right. Now, going to UK for this next story, independent from the UK, says consumer confidence is now dropping, and Trump's brief honeymoon with the public appears to be over.
Well, you find all kinds of stories trying to say that, Trump is blowing it, that things aren't, there's turn away from him. The honeymoon is over, but I don't see that at all. I see him as popular as anything still right now. What he hasn't been able to do is bring prices down. As a matter of fact, he's about to put them all back up again because he's just put tariffs.
Oh, the tariffs,
steel and aluminum.
Well, the interesting thing is about, of course, steel and aluminum being base products where they're used in other things. A lot of other products use either steel or aluminium, and they add, so they're only a base product. They may only have 1 or 2% increase in price on a product, but they will put everything up.
Yeah. Now, a big hoofra is the price of eggs. And recently, actually, Gary sent me a little video where the people in the press were complaining about the price of eggs not having come down as Trump had said they would. And then she promptly says, well, who killed all the chickens? It was Biden. Biden did that. Well, no, it wasn't really Biden who did that. It was the people who control chickens, because the avian flu had run through the flocks of chickens, the domestic chickens, and they had to cull them. They had to kill a lot of the chickens so that the avian flu wouldn't get worse. That's a common thing that happens. Remember, we called our herds of cattle because they had mad cow disease. So this happens from time to time, and it's just thought to be an unfortunate thing. But now it's become a political thing. The reason why eggs are so high in the United States has to do with the availability of laying eggs, laying hens, and their populations have to be brought up to standard where the prices can come down, and that will take a few months.
And that's
so it was Mother Nature. It wasn't Biden. It wasn't Trump. It was just basically Mother Nature.
And that's the thing that happens, right? It happens. Let's be honest about it. It's part and parcel of any agricultural produce, right?
Well, yeah, you've heard of like milk being dumped and all kinds of other things because of diseases or whatever else may happen. So this was definitely a Mother Nature thing. Avian flu got in among the domestic chickens, and in order for them to be able to stop that and stop the spread of the avian flu, they had to cull the chickens. They had to kill the ones that were likely to spread the disease and then start all over again. Yeah. So that's just strictly Mother Nature, and they're trying to trying to blame Trump or Biden, one or the other. It had nothing to do with either one of them.
Yeah, and that costs farmers a heck of a lot of money, because suddenly your chicken's an investment, right? And you may have cost it. I don't know how much a chicken costs, but to multiply that by n number that you need for for laying eggs and meat stock.
Yeah, so it's I don't know. Eggs is a particular thing because eggs is a source of protein, and normally an inexpensive means of protein. So if you get in the United States, it was like a couple of bucks for a dozen. Basically, call it $3 for a dozen eggs, and now it's well over $7. Well, that's double the amount. And when you're feeding your family, you're feeding your kids, it's a very good, inexpensive source of very good protein. I mean, it's like you can use eggs as a meat substitute, basically, because it's so rich in protein. And of course, it's got other good things like the bad cholesterol in it. People talk about that bad cholesterol, but it's really not nearly as bad as you think, provided you eat it in moderation. So, and combine it with other foods. So and I think that's the real stickler, because people have expected to have this food source for a very long time, and it's just a cycle. And about a half a year from now, the prices will come down back to where they normally should be. But
Oh yeah, yeah.
it all has to do with Mother Nature. It's not a political thing, but they're politicizing it. The press is politicizing it. The Trump administration is politicizing it. Um, so when the press asked, what about the price of eggs? They haven't come down. And they say, well, who killed the chickens? It was Biden who killed the chickens. No, it wasn't Biden who killed the chickens. It was just the ordinary regulatory body that ordered the call.
There's not a lot. To some extent, those decisions having to be made by a government organization, and you are typically done because that government organization collects data on this sort of stuff and makes recommendations.
No, it's not taken lightly.
Yeah,
so
it
wasn't Biden saying, okay, we're going to kill these chickens. If he didn't kill a chicken, or if the government regulatory bodies hadn't ordered the call, the problem would have got much worse. So, I don't know. It's just really, really dumb the way they frame everything nowadays. They politicize everything,
Yeah. And it wasn't a political thing at all. It was just.
No, Biden didn't call for the call.
Yeah.
It wasn't his decision to do that. And why would he interfere with that anyway? They're just doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So moving on. It's an interesting thing that you put in from the Jerusalem Post. A king will die, a nation will.
Maybe we should talk about that on Friday.
Well,
it's kind of like a nice Friday thing.
I was kind of fascinated by it.
Oh, okay. Well, go ahead. We'll talk about that. Well, this was
First of all, it's like, so these are revealed from 4,000-year-old Babylonian tablets, right? How can we know it's even about today?
Well, they've managed the Babylonian tablets, like we've mentioned on the show many times, and many people know.
Yeah.
The first very good pervasive form of writing was called cuneiform.
Yeah.
And it's a bunch of marks that they put on clay tablets. The scribes would put on clay tablets. And in these particular clay tablets from Babylonia, it is sort of the religious and magical sort of foretelling of what is going to happen. And of course, back in the day, they took signs and omens to tell you what was happening. And in this particular case, these tablets that were kept in the British Museum were found over 100 years ago in Iraq, have been deciphered.
Yeah.
And they have in this particular subtitle, a dark omen, lunar eclipses, and foreboding premonitions. It just gets an insight on how ancient peoples viewed things, and where they got their omens and where they took their direction from. And eclipses was one of the big things, of course. Early on in human civilization, they were able to determine, predict eclipses.
Yeah, and full moons happen once every 28 and a bit days, whereas eclipses only happen periodically.
Yes, and so lunar, it says here, lunar eclipses in particular were seen as dark omens.
Yeah,
such as the death of a king, For the reason Babylonians developed the method of calculating the occurrences of eclipses. This is known as Saros cycles, which covers a period of 222 lunar months and is able to help determine when an eclipse should occur. So, like I said earlier on, Babylonian astrologers were able to determine this. Now, this is the crossover point where science, religion, and observation all come into play. The reason why watching the stars and watching the celestial bodies and being able to predict eclipses and all that was very, very important to early civilizations. They had to have some sense of time. They had to have a good idea when to begin crops, planting of crops. Yeah. And to get that right, they will observe the skies and be able to predict time. And each different civilization had its own particular calendar. Of course, a lot of the calendars were based on lunar calendars, which the Muslim calendar and the Jewish calendar still are. But those are not good functioning calendars because they go out of whack early on. What the ancients did was figure this all out, and even in as the Aztecs, for instance, had a 360-day year, but they had 5 days of chaos basically to make up that extra 5 days. So it was kind of interesting how each different society.
Well, there's this thing that they've got in here called a Saros cycle, which covers a period of 223 lunar months.
Yeah. Now it says here they had indications or they had direct knowledge in their minds about what was going to happen. So if they predicted the death of a king, that is a definite thing, and people would be really worried about the effects of it. The others were more like there's an indication that this thing may happen or an indication that that might happen, and we're told by the stars and the moon what that's going to be, and we as the great priests know how to avert this. But sometimes they would just predict like the death of a king. Well, if you're a smart
Okay. It's just happened again. We've kind of lost Dave for a second.
There I am back again.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, Chris Money. What was that with Chris Money?
Egypt is hosting
an emergency Arab Summit because of Trump's Gaza affair.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to remind everybody that, the Israelis don't want the Americans to run Gaza. If they go along with it, it will be just so they hope they can get it from the Americans later. But what Trump is saying, he wants to own Gaza. He wants to buy it. I'm not so sure that's something that came out yesterday. He wants to buy it. Like, who's he buy it from?
Yeah.
If he buys it, he owns it. If he owns it, but the Israelis want it. The Zionists want it. They want it as part of their land, as do the Palestinians want it as part of their country. It's going to be quite a mess. I don't know how. Okay. I don't know how serious he is in the end, but anyway, he's grabbing headlines like he likes to do.
Yeah. Okay. So how does these dark omens, etc., relate to today?
Well, they don't at all. Of course, we don't. But we still have legacies of our old religions, and they go all the way back to Babylonian, even earlier in Sumeria, which was the first major civilization that came. It dates from about 500 years older than even Egypt. So and the legacy of this is twofold. Of course, we still carry a lot of the superstitions that we had then.
Yeah.
The astrologers that predict things are a direct line right back to these ancients who began it. And but the other part of it is these ancient astrologers who have observed the heavens a lot were always this. You can always find the start of science basically with the observations of the stars.
Yeah.
When people
Yeah.
started saying, "Hey, wait a minute, what are they? What do they do? What's their purpose?" And then you get the Greeks where they start to think of these things as more. Oh, wait a minute, wait a minute. These aren't any kind of religious things at all. They're like everything else on Earth. There's amount of consistency, and one of the Greeks actually even proposed that these were very distant suns. That's how insightful some of them were.
Well, the interesting thing is about this is that in here is talking about things like eclipses, solar eclipses, and comets have in various parts of the world been predictors of downfalls, right? Because
Oh, sure, King Herod
yeah,
before the Battle of Hastings,
yeah,
when
um,
uh, when Halley's comet
exactly,
came across the sky, his mother came to him and says, "Don't go into that battle. Don't go into that battle. You're going to get killed." And she would, of course, everyone said, "Oh, she's right," but that was just incidental to what, just
yeah.
coincidental. I mean,
And the thing is about all of these sort of things have been seen as a an omen, but how much extent they really are. Because the interesting thing is about what they were
well,
saying
they're
in
not at
here.
all.
Yeah, because one of the things was, it could be that in fact, actually, where was it? The some of the samples here is that a king might well be become great, um, and that might well then be that the people of that land suffer because now they have to pay the taxes to that great king. Or the other omen would be that the king would die, and therefore the people would celebrate because they wouldn't have to pay the king, pay for the king.
Well, I think the people back in those days knew that it depended on they really depended on the strength of their king, uh, and what the king do. Like there was always going to be war. There was always going to be war, and there was always going to be that. They just kind of knew all that, but they, of course, this is early religion, basically, and from these religions were born our own religions.
Yeah.
And the heralded signs of lunar eclipse, like pestilence, economic woes, the death of a king. There's the destruction of Elam in here, which is very interesting because Elam was a kingdom that was a nuisance to Babylonia, um, and I think they took it out finally. But Babylon, of course, was the civilization that destroyed the temple in Jerusalem, the first temple, Solomon's temple, and Jerusalem. They're the ones that did the Babylonian captivity, took the prominent, a large amount of Jewish
Yeah.
captives into Babylon. And when they went to Babylon, that is in the Babylonian captivity that the Jewish faith actually became monotheistic. Prior to that, Yahweh, or God, the same God we have today, was probably the most important God for that group of people. After they left Babylonia and came back, when Cyrus the Great of Persia conquered Babylonia and were allowed the Jews to go back to Jerusalem and build a temple. At that point, it was at that point where the Jewish religion had evolved into a monotheistic one. So
And it's during that time while they were in Babylonia, my understanding is that they also got there's some connectivity, if you like, with Zoroastrianism.
That may have been, because Zoroastrianism was the
Already
religion of the
monotheistic.
Persians. Zoroastrianism was probably the religion that the first monotheistic religion.
Yeah.
And that's maybe where the Jews got the idea of only one God. So and Zoroastrianism went on to influence the religions of that time. As a matter of fact, the three magi that talk about celestial bodies predicting things. Well, the star that people were following at the time of Jesus's birth, the three magi. The three magi is a Persian word for priest, basically. So wise men, the three wise men were magi's, which meant they were Zoroastrian priests.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. Mark Carney is more likely to expand the Liberal voter pool than any other candidate, according to recent surveys. Now, interesting. Over the weekend, I've been hunting surveys over the weekend because I saw this article published by somebody, just a front page article published by somebody saying that if Mark Carney wins the Liberal leadership, the polls will be 40% Liberal, 25% PC, and the rest pretty much as they are today. And I'm thinking to myself, there's no way, how can that possibly be? So I'm looking for that particular poll. So I went poll hunting on Saturday and Sunday, only to find that must have been a fake news story.
What you're going to find in the paper a lot nowadays, or the media now, you're going to find sort of interpretations of what's happening, depending on the agenda of the particular news article. If it's the Toronto Star, they're gonna tell you that.
Well, that's where I thought I would find it, but there's nothing in the Star.
Well, I think it's a little bit too early for polls. They haven't even decided their leader yet. So the Mark Carney will most likely be the next leader of the Liberal Party, and that's going to be a problem for Poilievre, because as long as Trudeau was the leader of the party and all the faux pas that Trudeau had done, it was an easy mark. However, Mark Carney has a much better reputation around Canada. Now, Mark Carney's been around for a long time, and he's done real work in the economy. He's been the governor of the Bank of England. He's been the governor of the Bank of Canada. He's been in a lot of...
Those are credentials you cannot undermine. Very difficult to undermine those credentials, right?
That's right. And he was able to save Britain after the Brexit thing by what the bank did. He reduced interest rates very rapidly so that Britain could get over that lump of actually dumping Brexit. So there was a lot of things that he's able to do in both Canada and the Bank of England. And he's already taken a lot of the sort of the asset away from Poilievre, who was going to have a carbon tax election. Well, that's not happening because all the Liberals say they're going to axe the tax anyway. And so Carney is a very popular guy. He's he works a crowd very well. He's witty, popular, and Poilievre is on his back foot a bit here because he's been kind of abrasive and harsh and those things, and he's not extremely well liked, his personality. So Carney, what looked as if Trudeau was still the prime minister, or going to be the prime minister at the time of the election, the Conservatives would have won a massive tsunami of a victory. But that's not going to be the case now, because Carney's bringing back a lot of voters.
Yeah, and exactly. What Abacus data here are saying is that Mark Carney is more likely to expand the Liberal Party's voter pool than Chrysler Freeland or the other candidates.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues here. For one thing, the Conservatives have an enormous war chest. Poilievre has built the party, has expanded it by 300,000 more members throughout the country, and he's got a massive election war chest. The Liberals don't, but the Liberals now have a very good leader that is presentable to the people and who has real world experience in very high end economic matters. And our economy is really the thing that's slowing this country down. And he would probably have very insightful ways of, as a matter of fact, Mark Carney worked for the Harper government years ago, not as a political figure, but just as somebody that during the 2008, 2009, when they had the big crash, it was Mark Carney that was working with Harper. So he's prior to this, at certain points, he was apolitical, but now he has taken on the Liberal Party. The problem here is he's got too much of a mountain to climb. He's not even elected yet as the Liberal leader. We feel that he will be. He will be, and he has a strong relationship with the other prime candidate, which is Chrysler Freeland. Now, Chrysler Freeland is tainted with the performance of the government up until now, so she's not likely going to get the green light to go forward. But I think she will be right back into the cabinet again if Carney wins, and if he wins the government, he'll put her in the cabinet again. But
undoubtedly he would, but because he's got to live with, in building a cabinet, he's got to live with those that are in the Liberal Party that actually, the pool of good people within the Liberal Party who can do the jobs he needs getting done, right? The point being, is it going to improve the excess of, is it going to improve voting for the Liberals? I think 8 to 10%, maybe 10 to 12%, maybe. I can't see more than about 15% boost in the polls.
Yeah, I think the massive. I think the Conservatives will still probably win.
Yeah,
will still probably win a majority, but that majority will shrink if Mark Carney is running the show.
Yeah,
because he's a much more he has everything that Trudeau has except the flakiness. He's got charm. He's got he is a heavyweight. Trudeau was a drama teacher. Carney was the governor of the Bank of England and then governor of the Bank of Canada.
Yeah.
And he is a heavyweight.
Yeah, and his career has been defined by moments of high-profile leadership, which I think basically means that high-profile leadership, when it comes to actually being the Prime Minister of Canada, is definitely, is definitely a powerful feature. And even though we, the public, probably don't really know who Mark Carney is compared to, say, Chrysler Freeland, I don't think we are really that much of a fool to actually think that we don't know what he can do.
Well, Mark Carney has done like every good Canadian politician who wants to get known in Canada. They go to the United States and go on talk shows in the United States because obviously they're not like, that's where we get our information. Like we go to Fox or we go to CNN. Both are rubbish. Political state, their politics are rubbish, but they do give you exposure. So,
yeah, and a lot of people up here watch those shows anyway.
Well, that's why they go to the stuff. Yeah. Mark Carney was being interviewed, and I don't know, whatever talk show it was some like maybe The Daily Show or something else like that, and
Mm.
he looks pretty good in those shows.
Well, interesting thing, as you were saying earlier here, was that Mark Carney tried to warn Britons about the economic risks associated with the Brexit vote leading up to that issue, and he said that it wasn't, he was not necessarily saying it was a wise thing to leave.
Well, he was probably against, as a good economist, he was probably against it. But once it happened, then he had to fix it.
Yeah.
Or make sure the transition didn't hurt the British economy too badly.
Yeah. Because otherwise that that Brexit could have had a complete collapse in business and consumer confidence.
Yeah. So basically, what we're facing now, what the predictions are now, the conservative popularity is dropping, the liberal popularity is going up, provided it's Carney that's going to be the leader.
Yeah.
And Karen says Carney has never been elected for anything. That's a good point. That's a good point. But he has had real world economic experience, whereas most like Trudeau was a drama teacher. He was involved in politics all his life, but he was a drama teacher. So that was his real world experience. Poilievre has been, I think he's been pretty much a career politician his whole life. So he's known nothing else. But here's a guy that brings in real world experience. So it'd be very interesting to see if they do bring on a guy like Mark Carney, the Liberals will not lose as much as they would have if Trudeau was still in.
Well, I think that a lot
Chris says, I read his book about his quest for zero carbon emissions. That would be interesting. Oh, okay. That would be very interesting. Chris has got some insights into him that we don't.
Yeah.
Because I don't know a whole lot about him.
Yeah. So the other thing to note about this is that I think that for a period of about 3 to 6 months, whoever is the new leader will have a honeymoon period within the Liberals, and typically I would say for Freeland, etc., I'd expect that to be 3 to 5%, but with Mark Carney, because he's not associated with the current government, at least in a lot of people's minds, he would therefore probably get much higher, maybe at the very most 10 to 15%, but I suspect 8 to 12.
Well, none of that's really predictable, and of course, you have what's happening
now.
It's
just my feeling.
And the whole complexion of the thing has changed because of the Trump tariffs and threat of tariffs and Trump's threat to annex Canada, and he wants to destroy Canada by economic force. He has said, as Howard Lutnick, his advisor in these matters and tariffs, they want to dismantle the Canadian auto industry, therefore making it impossible for Canada to exist, and therefore force Canada to be to become the 51st state. As far as Greenland is concerned, he's talking about taking people and just taking it militarily if he has to. But right now, we'll see what happens, because that is going to be a major issue that was unexpected leading up to this. Like the Conservatives were pretty happy with having a carbon tax election, which would have won them huge amounts of seats, but that has all been taken away from them because all the Liberals say we're gonna get rid of the carbon tax. Funny how that happens. They weren't going to do it when they were in power, but now there's a threat to their power. All of a sudden, this carbon tax is all not that important, and the carbon tax is one of Carney's ideas as well. But now he's turned his back on it and decided to put the carbon tax in other areas. but still a carbon tax, not a direct one at the pumps, though.
Yeah. Okay. Boomers love him for delaying the 2009 crisis by lowering the BOC interest rates at 1.5 quickly.
Yeah. Chris has some pretty good insights here. If he's read his book, he knows a lot more about him than you and I do.
Well, there you go. Okay, so moving on. Ontario government is investing 35 million in the Shore Festival. So this was announced by on Saturday by Doug Ford as he was doing a whistle stop tour of Niagara, and they're investing in the Royal George Theatre.
Yes, this is really good news. Now you think of Niagara on the Lake, which is just down the river from us, and it is a sort of higher end city. People there have more money than the average Ontarian, even in this region, and even at that, they're stuck with their old theater. They can't. They're going to have to. They have two major theaters, of course. They have the Shaw Festival Theater, the modern one, and they have the old one, which they originally started out, which is the one they're talking about there, the George,
the Royal George,
the Royal George, and that was that goes back 109 years ago. So I think it was a combination of burlesque house, a movie theater. It was a movie theater for the longest time when I first remember it. And then, of course, it was converted into a playhouse. But that old building is 109 years old and needs massive restructural work. You would think that the region or Niagara on the Lake would be able to front the bill for that because it's so essential to their economy. But they're not. They need provincial help. And along comes Doug Ford. It's election time, and he's got $35 million for the Royal George.
Well, I'm going to be a bit cynical here because it's like I get maybe asking for 3.5 million. I may be asking for 5 or 7 or 8 million, but 35 million seems excessive.
That seems like a lot, but remember, what they're going to do with it is probably just not to repair it. It's probably to expand it, make it much more of a specialized performing theater, much similar to the newer Shaw Festival Theater. It was never meant to be, or what it is now, a theater where performances go on the stage. So they're probably not only just fixing it, but expanding it and just changing it, basically, I think.
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm just saying 35 million is a lot of money to be going into this.
Yeah, it doesn't break down where this money's going to. It just says that it's going to be, it's going to boost the Shaw. I think it has a whole lot to do with not just the theater, but the Shaw Festival itself. And this is a heritage building. They're trying to get it up to snuff. And Chris Mooney, totally woke and broke. I don't know what he's referring to there. But anyway, so basically it's going to be right there on Main Street. So the extent of which, like I said before, it's probably not just to fix it. It is to embellish it and to make it quite a thing. But remember, $35 million doesn't go very far these days. Seriously, it doesn't go very far at all. $35 million Canadian is like $10 US.
Yeah, it's easy to be cynical, but I know we what you're saying. But in fact, actually, very often, the irony about that is that I love old buildings. Don't get me wrong. I love old buildings. I generally prefer that we save old buildings than, and keep our history than be building new ones. But when it comes to things like theaters and the like, often it's easier to build a new one than it is to maintain an old one.
Maybe, but they have. Look, they were going to close it down. This was going to be the last season they were able to use the Royal George. After this, they couldn't use it again, because it had too many issues. So the issues with it are going to be huge. I imagine. Like, there's going to be foundational issues. There's going to be structural issues. Then they're going to have to make sure it's a functioning theater, one that's going to be safe for the people in the audience. It's also going to have all the amenities of a theater that people expect these days. It's going to have the lighting, the special effects, all these other things. And like I said, $35 million really doesn't go a whole lot away here. Now, if this can, the fact that the Royal George was going to close was going to impact the economy of Niagara-on-the-Lake, and it was going, not only was it a heritage thing, but it was also an economic thing. And remember, we bring in a lot of tourists here to watch those plays.
We do.
It's not just Canadians that do it. We get droves of Americans coming over because they like Shaw plays like anyone else. There are a lot of
we get British
very close to us in Lewiston and that will come over here and go to watch a play at Shaw. And particularly now, the Yankee Dollar will go so much further over here. I expect the Shaw Festival to be hugely attended to by our American cousins.
Yeah, and not only just Americans, as British as well, love Shaw as well.
Yeah, they fly over for a play once in a while, I'm sure.
Well, actually, there was interesting. I was talking to an English gentleman who he actually spends his autumn down in Niagara-on-the-Lake, going to the Shaw Festival plays.
Yeah, they're good plays. They're good productions. The last one I saw there was, I took my mother. It was called Blithe Spirit, but it was there's a Noel Coward one, but there are some excellent plays there, and they make a ton of money anytime they do My Fair Lady, which of course is based on which is just the musical version of Pygmalion by Shaw. So the people love these plays and these stories, and I do too. The problem is affordability. They cost a lot of coin. Well, my parents had a subscription there, and they went there a lot. And they did also. They went to the Alexandria Theater that Ed Mervish got up and running again back in the 80s and that. And I saw a lot of really good plays there because they had a subscription. And the price per play was less. Now, what you do is you go to plays that you normally wouldn't buy a ticket for and are pleasantly surprised sometimes that you didn't know about a certain play. So that's if you have the money and can get a subscription and go every time there's a play, that's great. But
yeah,
and a lot of seniors too keep these plays going because they do have the time to go to matinees and things of that kind. So I don't know. It's a very important thing for Niagara-on-the-Lake. Shakespeare was already taken by Stratford, so they have the Stratford Festival is devoted to Shakespeare. Shakespeare was already taken, so they took the next most well-known playwright was Shaw.
The interesting thing is actually that the Shaw Festival Theatre in Niagara-on-the-Lake has many similarities to the Shaw Festival Theatre in Marylebone Road in London.
Oh, possibly.
It was likely designed. It's a smaller building, but it's likely designed around the same concept.
Yeah. So yeah, these are important things. I just wish that the people of the Niagara region got a break on the price of a ticket. I love going to
Yeah,
plays, but
I, I would love
they're
I
very,
would love
very,
to see that.
yeah, they hit the pocketbook, and you can understand why, because the productions are fabulous, and the acting is usually superb, and it when I saw Blythe, it actually had Angela Lansbury there in it, and she was 88 years old, and
Interesting thing is, though, point to note, Dave, if you want to go and see cut price productions, you can often see there's often with the Shore Festival, there's actually many plays that they run that are like um, not the main plays, but they secondary plays that they run like at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, midday or something like
matinees,
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
matinees,
and
which
they
is much
and then there
earlier.
are whilst they're not the ones that you want, kind of the big show ones, they're often by secondary actors, but they're often very well done.
Oh yeah. Um, I would like to remind people that in Buffalo they have theater groups in Buffalo too. I saw some great plays in the Shea at Shea's in Buffalo. I saw the Dollhouse there. I saw a couple of excellent plays uh, in in Buffalo, and there are theater groups in Buffalo. I wish I knew them better. That where you can actually go and get a very good play by uh, the lesser known actors, basically, but are still as good as any. And you can get a really good live performance there. And I think that kind of thing should be motivated a lot too. Where you have lesser known, lesser higher priced actors and production people that can actually put on a
Well,
good play for the average person.
well, that actually, when you think about it, many, treading the boards, as they call it, is actually for many actors and actresses, is actually the fallback position. What they do when they're not doing a TV show or a film, they go back to their basics. And some people only do one or two films in their life, and have been on stage for most of their life, right? In fact, there was some people. There was an actor that I was reading their thing recently that they've been on stage since they were like 5 years of age. They were from 5 till 85. They were there.
Oh, I can't. As far as an actor is concerned, I don't think you can get any more gratification than being on
Yeah,
live theater, like on a
yeah.
stage, because you have a audience full of souls there that you can interact with. Whereas I have a lot of admiration for film actors that can can act where there is no real audience watching them. That's pretty good too. But when
It's a
you're in a
different
live
thing.
performance, you are actually
Yeah,
in the room with people, right? And you are telling them a story and performing. And I think you can feel the electricity of the audience. I think for a lot of actors, it's not just that they love to act, but it's an addiction. They love that feedback they get from audiences. And I think as far as the audience is concerned too, that without the tricks of technology like cameras and all that, the actor on the stage has to perform in such a way that you get the
yeah,
story, you understand it, and
yeah. And on the stage,
really good film. Lots of so many good film actors come from the stage, like even
yeah.
Michael Caine, you know, guys like
Well, as
that.
I would say, there's many actors that are maybe famous for one or two film parts that they've ever done in their life, but the vast majority of their career has been on the stage.
Yeah, I've seen television or series where they have an actor, actress I've never seen before, but they perform astonishingly well.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the one play I saw in Buffalo, The Doll's House, when I read the program for it, I everyone in that play had bit parts in TV shows. So they were bit part actors in TV shows or in commercials and things like that. And everyone in the show was recognizable from a commercial or a small part they had done in some TV show that you'd recognize them, but not as a major actor, not as a headliner or anything. And these people acted as well as anyone. And it was fabulous production, which just gives you an idea of the scope of the actors out there. Anyways, I think it's 5 after, and
yeah, absolutely.
We didn't talk too much, but I expect the stock market to do a shimmy, shimmy, shank now because Trump has put a 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum from around the world, which was going to upset the markets, I think. Of course, Canada and Australia, even Australia. So Canada, like Trump is punishing all his allies. I don't get that.
I don't get that
after
either.
China, but he's kind of punishing all the allies. And I'm not so sure. This is pretty confusing for allies of the United States to see themselves being punished this way. I don't think he got the tariff thing right.
I don't think he knows how
I don't think
work.
he got it right.
I don't think he understands how they work properly.
Yeah, like when he withdrew the tariffs for Mexico and Canada, he did it partly because the markets were reacting negatively. That was part of it. So
yeah. All right. Well, anyway, have a great day, everybody. And Dave,
without further ado, I bid you adieu. Let's pray for peace. Let's hope that